Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name's Maria Spies, and I'm the co-CEO of Holland IQ. Welcome to this session. Super excited to be joined by Ted Chen, the Vice President of Globalization for ClassIn. And as many of you know, ClassIn is an amazing success story, a really, really interesting company working in a very interesting space. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you so much, Maria, for this invitation. I'm super glad to monitor on social media that your 100 Days of Impact has been going really well so far. And I am very proud of the fact that I sort of nudged a couple of my colleagues, including our C-suites, to your Singaporean and Indonesian summits. Hello, everyone. My name is Ted Chen, and I represent ClassIn for this session. I'm very eager to share with you for the past 8 years where our company has been learning about the K-12 anti-learning landscape in East Asia and how we're continuing to improve and enable this prominent, very, very interesting marketplace.
Great. Thanks, Ted. Okay, so the session today, we have around 30 minutes. Ted's going to walk us through the story of ClassIn and also what's happening in the market. And then, we'll have a bit of a discussion throughout that presentation and then also more discussion at the end. And so I'm going to hand over to you, Ted, to take it away.
Thank you so much. All right. Really briefly, I guess I'll start with an introduction of what ClassIn is. I know, despite being a very dominant player in EdTech in this sector, and definitely occupying the lane of sort of hybrid learning solutions for quite a while now, and is the industry-defining solution in a sense in this space. We still have a long way to go of sort of morphing out of the startup phase in a substantial company. So let me just introduce our companies and our products very briefly. We are sort of starting from the learning environment software. We have been gaining a lot of traction in East Asia and across Southeast Asia. Currently, especially with the COVID boost, we have 50 million users worldwide that is using our virtual classroom, as well as a sort of basic level of LMSs as their primary learning software. Very happy to be enabling more than 30 million sessions every month happening all across the world. And this is an astounding statistics for me to learn about when I joined the company earlier this year as well. It is a company that is heavily engineering heavy because this is a very complex system that we're going to build, and I'll explain why it is complex later on in our conversation. But we do have a lot of globalization priorities at the moment, and me heading over our operations in US, Korea, and Japan, all the developed markets, but also as well as a substantial operational team that has been operating in Southeast Asia for quite some time. We have 3 primary products, starting with, as mentioned, the industry-defining virtual classroom, and soon to become a full-scale LMS by the end of the year. Is already in company beta. Very excited about that. We have a hardware classroom LT product that really enables students to tune in to a physical classroom wherever he or she is. He can be another offsite facing a big TV screen, or he can just use your tablet with our ClassIn app. So it's really just about facilitating all of that dynamics and making sure students joining from everywhere can have the same kind of engagement and see the same blackboard as the students in that physical classroom. And we will be launching and already small scale testing the teaching material marketplace product. It's sort of like a GitHub for teachers product. We won't be heavily focusing on this session, but if you're a publisher, feel free to reach out to us and learn more about it. Because we have been operating in this lane, sort of being very lonely in this lane for quite some time, we were able to establish a lot of global partners that are super prominent, K-12 elite schools and higher education institutions, including industry-leading tutoring solutions as well, like I Can Read, Lingoace, Học Mai in Vietnam, as well as some very advanced technology partners as integrational partners, which is signed an MOU with Amira Learning, which is a really incredible product in AI-enabled literacy coaching. And that is generally how we're approaching the market at the moment, because we're infrastructural. We can hold and facilitate and enable all kinds and all sector learning in live stream format, and that's been our progress so far. So today, I'd like to, the first section of our talk, I want to focus on a little bit just the big picture of what is happening in K-12 schools and what is happening in K-12 tutoring in the East Asian market, because those are our prominent client segments, and we do have a lot of devotion and passion in enabling both of these two sectors. So with K-12 schooling, the biggest impact heavy area, what we're seeing across East Asia is a really quite homogeneous landscape, starting with very high enrollment rates and compulsory most of the time to K-12, K-9, and in Korea it's K-12. So like the government really spends a lot of resources, funding and activation in local, especially disadvantaged areas, to motivate students to get the education that they need and have a substantial leverage when they go into society. And Japan, we're using Japan as the sort of primary example on this slide, but they're actually a pretty lone wolf figure for the GDP spent on education. Is one of the lowest because their higher ed and high school education are heavily privatized. But in China, this is a 4% spend, middle of the road of OECD, and in Korea, Singapore, they have some of the highest GDP per capita on education. So the government really, really cares, and they do utilize a lot of resources and funding to make sure that the educational market is well funded and financed. So those are sort of the highlights of East Asia's schooling system, but with very strong historical and cultural inclination, with the exam, the big exam at the very end of K-12 being the primary selection process methodology, not only to students going into college, but also to class mobility in massive countries. We have seen on the front lines, the students and teachers are not living their best life in a lot of senses. It has low student satisfaction with schoolwork. And very few instructional methodologies to really engage with students inside the class, because most of them are primarily lecture style, very much like one-to-many, one-directional education processes. That is still the dominant instructional strategy in East Asian schools. And what that leads to is the faculties are have to always juggle between schoolwork preparation and monitoring student progresses, long instructional hours. And that is why a lot of them are reporting, a significant portion of them are reporting work-related stress. And again, these are statistics or phenomena, I think, that are quite prevalent across all the economies that we're seeing in this sector. So, yeah.
Ted, can I just ask a question about that? Because on your last slide, the arrow at the bottom talked about shift to student-led pedagogies, and we see throughout this summit, and from others in the market as well, and from some sort of dynamics that we're seeing across the East Asia market, new solutions for supporting the well-being of student, focusing more on the student, like you say, student-led pedagogies, although historically and still dominating is a sort of very sort of disciplined and, as you say, one-to-many approach to teaching. Are you seeing the movement for an interest in student-led pedagogies coming from all sides, from the students themselves, from parents, from teachers, and from government? Are we just seeing the beginnings of that, or do you think actually we're absolutely on the road to changing or modifying or including more student-led pedagogies in formal and after-school processes? Where is that sort of coming from?
Yeah, so I think there's two directions. So the top-down, and we're going to touch on this a little bit later as well, on policy side, there has been a pretty consistent policy directive from all these governments, basically saying, we need to have a more holistic approach to education. We got to cultivate both academic rigor and also character, individuality,
Yes.
and soft core skills, basically, to help them prepare for actual real world settings. But I think there's a disconnect between policymaking, pedagogical thinking, and the actual on-the-ground execution when the exam was such a looming presence in teacher and students' lives. But there is a gradual shift as more post-80s generations, for example in China, post-80s is considered generally has been growing up in the or the most liberal ages or periods in modern China. They have sort of happiness metrics they want to track when it comes to student well-being. So their children would oftentimes be enrolled in extracurricular activities for after school instead of just another academic booster. So definitely, I think there's a general trend, but with the top down, there's a disconnect from the school leadership and down, and district leadership and down. And with bottom up, it's like parents are pushing for this, and the schools, especially private sector schools, are trying to cater to that more and more as a way of servicing what the clients actually want.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. So moving on to that, like it's a good segue to, I guess, talk about tutoring as well, because this is definitely the biggest academic tutoring market in the world. It has the largest tutoring operation by both spending and enrollment, and China, Korea, Japan basically host the top three of the entire world tutoring revenue, with China being the undisputed dominant player in the sector. And what has happened in the last 10 years really is just this formidable ascension of students being enrolled into tutoring as climbing in penetration rate. At the moment, it was averaging across all these economies at a majority rate for metropolitan students, and what that translates to is 6 hours of commitment in offline or after school tutoring, and obviously with that huge demand, the cost is not insignificant either. For I would say tier 3 parent in Chinese cities, their seasonal passes for offline boosters would easily equate to maybe half of their monthly salary for the kids. So it is a significant commitment, both on time and monetary. It has both of these restraints to the family, and that is why we're seeing a shift, or very aggressive shift, especially in China, in moving things online, because it does save a lot of cost. The tutoring companies don't need to pay the rent anymore. That's 30-40% of their margins, and the